Welcome back to Lucid Fitness Podcast. I'm Erik and this is Sarah, and this is our fifth and final episode of our Psychology of a Fit Person, where we talk about our trials and tribulations as we went through beginner stages, intermediate, and advanced stages of our lifting career, and just kind of helping you guys get some perspective on your journey of what it's like to start, to be honest. Last episode, we talked about what it looked like once we started getting more comfortable in the gym and when we started feeling less out of place and more like we knew what we were doing. And this episode, as a final episode, we're going to talk about the transition from that period of understanding what we were doing to the period of where we felt like we could contribute to the community and that we could give back in ways of, knowledge and experience and things like that. I know that for me, it was kind of a blurry situation. It almost feels like it happened overnight. I just reached a point in my career where more and more people, they'd talk to me. More people would kind of ask for advice. People would approach me and ask me what I was doing for my arms or what I do for my abs. And people of all walks of life in all different, niche experience, kind of, they still need advice, right? And so sometimes people would come to me and, ask advice, but I would essentially tell them, like, you're doing the right thing. You just have to do it for longer. And then I'd have people come up and, they want to target a specific, body part to lose fat and, sort of certain type of misinformations that a lot of people pick up on the internet. And so I saw all sorts of people, and it wasn't like an overwhelming amount of people coming and asking for advice. It was more of every once in a while, and as I got bigger and bigger and as I got more confident in the gym, I think that people picked up on that and they're like, okay, this guy clearly been in the gym for a while and knows what he's doing. Let's ask him specific advice, based on, and, there are occasionally, you've probably seen it since you've been lifting with me, people who come up and straight up are like, I want to look like you. Right? Yeah. And, while it's, a flattering thing to have happen, it's also one of those things where I don't think beginners should compare themselves to people who've been in the gym. And I've said this before, who have been in the gym for a long time, because it's kind of counterproductive to do that, because a lot of these people who look really good, they've either been in the gym for a long time or they're on some sort of substance, right? Or they're taking some sort of drug to enhance the way they look, and they're getting it in a much faster manner. And so comparing yourself to these people who in your eyes look like the ideal body for your current time is a dangerous thing to do, right? And if you talk to a lot of them, and hopefully a lot of them are honest with you, like, and I try to be honest with people, it's like, don't try to look like me, try to look like the best version of you, like as you progress. You can't look like the 10-year in the gym version of you when you've only been in the gym for 1 year. Yeah. Right? It's a gradual process. It takes a lot of time to manifest these gains. It takes a lot of time in the gym, in the kitchen, building up the slow, gradual progress that is bodybuilding. And so I think that as I started getting more and more people coming and asking me, like, what you're doing for this, or what routine, or, what do you eat, or how much you eat, those sorts of questions, it becomes obvious at a point for people who stick with it for a long time that they understand what works for at least them. Yeah. And a lot of the times that also aligns with what works for most people. Because I think after you've been in the game for a while, and the Lucid Fitness principles, they're designed around very specific things that are in every workout and in every successful routine. Like there's these elements that are reoccurring. And so as I started getting more and more people who wanted advice, I really started thinking about it more, because, you don't really want to give pure bro science, but you also, like me specifically, like I've never been somebody who leans too heavily into the science, because while I think science is valuable, especially for the elite lifters, there's a certain element of trying to do things in a vacuum, in a perfect scenario that isn't realistic for the vast majority of people.
It becomes weeds for people to muddle through, and it can be it can create such a large barrier to entry because
Yeah.
it feels like so much information.
Right. And it's a trap. The science side of fitness and nutrition, while it's valuable and if it can be distilled, it can be distributed to beginners in a meaningful way. But for the most part, it's not being distilled in a meaningful way
Mm.
to the point where like the average person can utilize it, right?
Mhm.
And so we stick to these core principles, even us, like we follow the core principles because they're practical and they can be used in a functional way. But I'm kind of getting off topic. So as more and more people started asking me advice or making comments, I really started thinking about what it is that made my journey successful. And we talk about this in one of the other core principle episodes. We talk about the importance of consistency and discipline.
Mm.
And that's always kind of been my strong suit. Like I wouldn't say I'm particularly gifted in terms of genetics or, even muscular shape. I look good now, but it's like I've been doing it for 15 years. I'd hope I'd look pretty decent, right? And so I've always kind of leaned into just, an overwhelming amount of discipline when it comes to the gym. I understood it was one of the main intuitive understandings for me was that if I keep going, eventually I'll look good. And, for me, it took a significant amount of time before I looked at myself and was like, okay, I look above average, right? I I try not to have like philosophical, conversations in the gym, but for fitness and nutrition, it's a long, long journey.
Mm.
And for Lucid Fitness, we preach it as a lifelong journey because, in my opinion, it's one of the few ways to get where most people see themselves looking. The only way to get there without having, assistance, right, is to do it for a long time and go through the trials and tribulations that we went through and get to that point where you can start feeling like you're confident giving information to people.
Yeah.
And for me, it took a while, because honestly, for a long time, I didn't want to talk to anybody, and so most people didn't talk to me because I was unapproachable. But as you start getting more confident, you open up a little bit more, and then more and more people. And I've made friends. I have had people who come to me and is like, I don't really. Care what you have to say. Let me just lift with you. I've had people who, come and is like, I don't want to interrupt you. Can you just tell me, how much protein to eat or something like that? And a lot of them, they're doing the right thing.
Yeah.
They're already doing the right thing in a lot of cases. One of my buddies, Peyton's one of the more recent examples. When he came to me, I was like, okay, well, how are you eating? What does your sleep look like? And I asked him all of these questions and he answered them all appropriately. And
Mhm.
it's like, to be honest, bro, if you did this for 10 more years, you're going to look exceptional.
Yeah.
Right. And I should have told him, I was like, I honestly wouldn't change a thing because if you try to get on my diet, and I've talked about this plenty of times before, if you try to get on my diet, it's not going to work for you. You can't eat this much. You can't, like it's unreasonable to expect you to be able to, eat at an elite level, like without
Yeah.
floating my own boat. But it takes time,
Yeah.
it takes a lot of effort to gradually and, apply progressive overload across all of the aspects of your life to slowly eat more, to slowly, consume better foods, to slowly lift more and all of those things.
Yeah.
But for me, it was a long journey and a slow journey of people slowly coming more and more. And that's when once I had a period of about 2 weeks between two jobs, probably 5 or 6 years ago. And during that 2 weeks, like pretty much all I did was relax. And it was a very eye-opening experience because I started getting that spark of motivation to distill the lucid principles. And they sat there in my notebook, in my digital notebook, for a long time before I really was like, oh, why don't I do something with this? I had written it down during this period of enlightenment, and I wanted to spread that because I truly believe like these principles are what get people from beginner to where we are now, where they can contribute back to the community and give appropriate advice based on not just pure science, but the principles they're rooted in science. But it's not like this isn't you don't really need science, right? You don't really need to know the optimal amount or, the optimal weight or the optimal amount of reps. Like there's recommendations, and that's what everyone online is giving you is
Yeah.
recommendations. And I try to distill it down. And then once I had that information, I was like, okay, well, I want to do something with fitness. And I decided to, start using those principles for a company where I can, do the podcast with you. And I met you shortly after I started
Yeah.
that. And then I know for me, one of my early experiences with you in the gym was what I normally experience. Somebody came up to you while we were lifting. As a woman, she walked up and she wanted to know about the grip for, I think it was lat pull down. You
Yeah.
remember that?
Mm-hmm.
And she came up and you talked to her for a while. You showed her the ropes, and I was like, interesting. I think she has the same thing happening to her. Like I think she will do well helping me with this journey.
Yeah.
So we've kind of been learning this together, which is pretty cool. But has that happened to you for a while, or was that a like an is that a fairly new thing for you in terms of?
I don't think it's a fairly new thing. It definitely was once I started working um, at the second gym I worked at. It was because I was actually working with people at that point instead of just the opening shift by myself or just the closing shift by myself. It was my coworkers who would see the food that I would bring in, how I would meal prep, and then how I would either, before I started my shift, I would be there. Oh, I had a dog hair. Before I started my shift, I would be there 2 hours before and I would do my workout and then I would change and start my shift. Or I would stay after my shift and I would work out and they would all be watching me. And it was then that I started getting some of the younger girls and some of the women who also had kids the same age as mine who were going, oh, oh, you can make time for this. You figured out how to do this. Can I work out with you? Or they would be really excited to show me, oh, look, I meal prepped like you did, and we would have our lunches together in the break room. And that's kind of how it started because they were the ones who were seeing me the most. And so I started, meeting with my coworkers before shift, or they would get off their shift before my shift, and we would do our workout together. And I would kind of walk them through, okay, well, I'm doing a shoulder day, so we're doing this, this, and this, and kind of showing them basically the same idea, the progressive overload, and how to do sets and reps, and how to block out your time, all of those sort of things. And then every now and then I would work out and people would come up to me and they would ask me things, of course, like, how do I do this? Or this is what I'm looking for. How do I get to that point? And I'm not sure how much of that was how I looked or because I also worked there. But either way, there would be little moments where people would go, oh, let me just ask you this real quick. And I think definitely was more women. I think most young men probably, I see young men coming up and asking you questions. And for the most part, I usually have young women who are coming up and asking me questions or other moms who are like, you look like you know what you're doing. And then I met you and you were like, hey, I want to do this thing where you had boiled this down into these core principles that really were so easy to digest for beginners. And that's where I was coming from, where I was basically just had beginners. I had people who had either never stepped foot in a gym or never tracked their food or had no idea what to do. And they were going, I'm so overwhelmed. Just tell me what to do. And I latched onto that immediately that I was like, yes, this is exactly what people need. And at that point, then we just took it and ran with it.
Yeah, for sure. And it's an evolving process,
Yeah.
right? Especially, I view it as our our new journey of fitness in a
Mm.
lot of ways. Like we reach this level. I definitely don't think our time in the gym or our gains but gains they slow down after a while. And if
Yeah.
you want to continue to get gains, I've always viewed it as like if you want to continue to get like noob gains, you got to help noobs because you can't get them forever. And
Yeah.
so it's almost a way of creating exponential gains, right? Because for every one noob that we can start, get to the 1 year mark, like I consider, obviously I don't take credit for their journey. They're putting in the work, but it's almost like spreading the gains around, like
Yeah.
helping other people find a set of, and honestly, the Lucid principles, they aren't for everyone. They'd work for everyone, but they aren't for everyone. Some people want more in-depth science to feel motivated. Some people like making things specifically perfect. And, I eat this, nut now, I eat 10 calories here, like crazy things like that. Some people thrive in those, min-max type scenarios, but I don't think the vast majority of people need that. And vast majority of them definitely don't want it.
Yeah.
Like most people are just like, okay, just give me reasonable things that I can follow, because when you're starting, it's never like, well, I shouldn't say never, because a lot of people do binge lifting where they're super
Gung ho.
ready to
And
go, and then they drop out and then they stop. But for the vast majority of people, like they just want to dip their toes in. And the Lucid Principles, they give you a reasonable way of doing that. You can read them on the website
yeah.
within, it's probably like a 10-minute read. If you want to dig deeper, we have all of our core principle videos. And if you like following our journey, you can watch these more, I guess, candid and less, professionally structured videos of where we talk about our journey, right? But I do think that the journey from beginner to, a high level, it takes a lot of time, and honestly, in my opinion, anything that shortens that time by any substantial amount, gives you gains in a much, much more rapid way, isn't sustainable. And I think a lot of people know that, right? But there's also a non-zero amount of the population that doesn't care. It's like, get me gains as quick as possible. I want to spend my 20s jacked. Let's do it, right? But for those of us who are looking for, a more lifelong journey with more health and wellness in consideration,
longevity over time
yeah.
rather than an aesthetic for a short time.
Yeah, and it's not to say, you know, you can't look good as well, but I
Absolutely.
think in general, like you want to be both good looking and healthy, right?
Right.
Um, and I think that's a decision for you guys to make, right? Like we can't make the decision of when, or how quickly or how hard you go in the gym. We can't make that decision for you. What we can give you is the foundation and like our perspective. And clearly, like it's pretty similar of a journey. Like it's a much different circumstances, you and I, like talking this through, like we kind of got to the same exact spot if you think about it. Like
Funny
we're both
enough,
working on
yeah.
Lucid Fitness together. We're both rallying around, the core principles, but we got it in a very different, type of way,
Yeah.
right? And I think that that's probably normal, right? Like most people who take gym, fitness and nutrition seriously for as long as we have, eventually there'll be this itch to take the things that you've done that worked for you and give it to others, whether it be your kids, and we intend to do it with your kids.
Yeah.
Teach them when their age is right, to get them up to speed and let them know like this is how to best do it.
This
And
is how you take care of your body. This is how
exactly.
you feed your body. This is how you fuel your hormones. This is all of those things that truly in our society nowadays is heavily lacking.
For sure. And it's lacking in a weird way. It's lacking a lot due to, speaking of getting philosophical, it's lacking due to too much information, right? Like it reached a point where it's hard to find information that is truly distilled for like in a functional way. And
Yeah.
that's what I found. It's part of the reason I stopped really even consuming fitness and nutrition for a long period of time, like especially as the internet evolved into what it is today. It is just like it was overwhelming, and it was hard to find things that weren't just the same core principles that we teach phrased or presented in a different way.
Yes.
And it's like, if I'm just reading different perspectives on the same core principles, why don't we just distill this into,
Yeah.
the core principles and try to give them to people, right? And, even if it's, a small amount of people at first, but it'll be a growing amount. And we want these ideas to evolve, take these core principles and when you become somebody who wants to give back to the community, you can, you know, create your own core principles, create your own design around these things that work, and help give back and help spread the word.
Right, because you never know how your perspective on something or something that clicks in your brain can also make it so that that one thing that was hard for someone to understand then clicks for them. That's how humans work. That's how we become such a collaborative society.
Yeah, and that's a good point. Is while I think that lucid fitness principles will work for the vast majority of people, in fact, there's not very many things in my life that I know, like that I absolutely know. But I'm of the understanding that the way we present it may not be for everybody.
Right.
Maybe you need to hear about these things from in a different way.
Yeah.
Right. And that's where, your guys' journey and you reaching a level where you can give back is important to us because maybe the way you use these core principles on your journey to get to, your advanced a level, maybe that is what the next person needs. And that's what, when I said exponential, it's like, it's casting a net, right? Like, even if, 1% of the people who watch our content resonate with it, that's a lot of people over time resonating with it who can go on and influence others to do good in their life and to be healthy, right?
Yeah.
And that's the goal, right? Is to get the word out there of what we think is important, distilled aspects of fitness and nutrition, give it to you guys so you guys can use it if you want, or evolve it if you want, and go from there. But we do appreciate all of you guys who do tune in. It's been a journey already, and we've been doing this for a year now. So I appreciate all of you guys who do watch this from front to end, and hopefully you guys can find some time to actually implement these principles and let them change your life, right? And develop a lifestyle around fitness and nutrition like we have, instead of trying to do the normal, bouncing around. And the first month of every year you're going to the gym. While it's certainly you trying, we'd like you to find a more balanced approach. What we're trying to teach is that this says that if you build the right structure around the core principles, the Lucid Fitness core principles, your life it'll actually get easier, because these things that strengthen you and make you healthier and give you more energy, they feed back into everything else in your life, and they'll enable you to do greater things in your life, whatever your goals are.
Yeah.
Maybe your fitness and nutrition goals aren't the end all be all of what you want from your life, but they will certainly enhance them. Yeah, for sure.
Absolutely. And we've done a lot of talking about core principles, so I'm going to put the core principles right here, the entire playlist. If you haven't seen any of them, or perhaps you've missed some of them, this is a great opportunity to maybe scrub through them and see. And of course, come join us over on Discord. If you have questions, maybe you have some in-depth ideas, or you have some really questions about what do I actually do from here, especially at the beginning of the new year, come over and join us on Discord. We are there all the time answering questions. We have lots of different channels to help you connect.